In Southern California, the ground doesn't just move, it snaps. And when it snaps like this, it doesn't ask permission. It doesn't wait for daylight. It doesn't care if you're driving, sleeping, working, or standing in a doorway with your phone already shaking in your hand. The first jolt is violent. The second is worse because now you understand what the first one was. You feel the city's confidence drain out through the cracks in the pavement. Sirens start stacking on top of each other, one after another, until they blur into a single continuous scream. And then the aftershocks come in, louder, closer, meaner, like something underneath is testing the surface, looking for the weakest point to punch through. Cars skid at intersections as drivers lose the steering wheel for a heartbeat. Streetlights whip side to side like they're trying to tear themselves free. Inside high-rises, people watch office blinds swing as if a giant hand is shaking the building by its frame. In neighborhoods of stucco and tile, residents stumble into yards barefoot, holding children, holding pets, holding nothing at all except panic. The shaking is not a clean wave. It's jagged. It's irregular. It feels like the ground is changing its mind every half second. Left, right, up, down, like it can't decide how to break you. And as soon as it stops, the silence is unnatural because everyone is waiting for the next hit. The moment between quakes is not relief. It's the inhale before a second punch. Phones light up. Messages fail. People try to call loved ones and get nothing. No ring, no answer, just a dead end that makes their stomach drop. In some areas, power flickers and then goes out, leaving whole blocks dark while the sky still looks normal, almost insulting in its calm. Emergency alerts start appearing, brief, blunt, impossible to ignore. And those alerts don't calm anyone down. They confirm the fear, something big is happening, and it isn't over. The roads begin to clog, not because people know where to go, but because they know they cannot stay where they are. Commuters freeze at on-ramps, unsure whether to keep moving or stop. Some people pull onto shoulders and step out, staring at overpasses like they're watching a predator. Others push forward because standing still feels like surrender. Then the aftershocks roll in. Not a gentle tremor, another hard jolt, another sudden bucking motion that turns the inside of your body to water. Loose bricks drop, glass cracks. A shelf that survived the first shock now leaps off its supports and shatters. A freeway sign that looked stable seconds ago suddenly sways with the wrong rhythm, and drivers duck instinctively, as if ducking can protect you from the weight of the world. In the first minutes after the main jolt, reality becomes fragmented. One neighborhood looks fine. 2 miles away, a street is torn. A few exits down, traffic is dead stopped because a bridge inspection forces lanes closed. People begin filming because filming feels like control. They aim their cameras at swaying palm trees, at rippling swimming pools, at the lines of vehicles choking the streets. But the footage doesn't capture the worst part, the sound. The low, rising groan that buildings make when they're being stressed beyond what they were meant to survive. And while the public scrambles to understand what they felt, the people who track the Earth are already staring at screens that won't stop moving. Their maps light up with fresh marks, new impacts, new jolts, new signatures. Their faces tighten, not with curiosity, but with recognition. Because this is what the beginning of a larger sequence feels like. Within minutes, officials start speaking in urgent, clipped statements. The words are careful, but the tone is not. They don't describe it as a shake. They call it an event, a major seismic event, a serious earthquake. They instruct people to stay away from damaged buildings. They tell drivers to avoid overpasses if possible, to expect road closures, to prepare for more aftershocks. Those last words, more aftershocks, carry the weight of a threat. Emergency agencies surge into motion. Dispatch centers light up with calls, reports of gas smells, cracked foundations, fallen power lines, injuries from falls, elderly residents trapped by debris, stairwells blocked, elevators halted. Firefighters roll out into traffic that's already snarling. Paramedics navigate streets where people have abandoned cars to stand in the open. Police attempt to control intersections where lights are out and drivers are making their own rules. Meanwhile, the scientific community, people who spend their lives studying patterns, are forced into the worst kind of uncertainty. The pattern isn't finished. Because the first quake is rarely the full story in Southern California, the aftershocks are not an echo. They are pressure redistributing. They are the Earth searching for balance in a broken place. And when pressure shifts, it can shift into something even more dangerous. Officials don't say Mega-Quake lightly. It's a word that changes behavior. It changes what people picture. Not a jolt, but a disaster that folds a region in half. When authorities appear alarmed, it isn't because they want attention. It's because they're watching the aftershocks roar in and they know the math of fear. Every new jolt is a reminder that the ground can do whatever it wants, whenever it wants, and nobody gets a vote. The warning signs don't look dramatic at first. They're small, scattered, easy to ignore, until you place them next to each other like pieces of a map. A couple of sharp jolts in one area, a cluster of trembling minutes later somewhere else. A strange pattern that suggests strain is not releasing smoothly. It's snapping in segments. People remember the sensation, that harsh, stuttering motion. Not a smooth roll, but a ripping movement, like the earth is tearing Velcro in the dark. And then the reports start piling up. Cracks appear in asphalt where there weren't any yesterday. Parking structures develop new lines that look like someone drew them with a thick black marker. A few older buildings show fresh damage around corners and seams. Homeowners step into garages and see tools scattered across the floor, water sloshed out of heaters, cabinets flung open. A gas odor drifts down a block. Someone shouts. Another person runs to find a shutoff valve they've never touched before. The moment they turn it, it squeals, and suddenly the smell becomes real in a way that makes the skin on your arms rise. Then comes the next aftershock, hard enough to jerk people off balance again. And somewhere, something that was already weakened gives up. A wall sheds bricks, a glass storefront spiderwebs and collapses. A chunk of concrete drops from a parking garage edge. A driver brakes too late, staring at a swaying signal, and rear-ends another vehicle. Not catastrophic by itself, but now the roadway is partially blocked and emergency vehicles are coming. Every aftershock is a new test, and the city is not taking the tests in a quiet classroom. It's taking them in traffic, in stairwells, in crowded apartments, in hospitals, in schools, in places where safety depends on systems functioning normally. But the systems are not normal now. The most terrifying part of a major quake sequence is not the first impact. It's the realization that the sequence has momentum, that something has started and it doesn't care about your plans. Authorities begin warning that more shaking is likely, not possible, likely. They push safety instructions. Stay away from windows, expect power outages, check on neighbors, brace for disruptions. They push out lists of what to do if you smell gas, what to do if water lines break, what to do if you see downed power lines. And still, the aftershocks keep roaring. In Southern California's cities, the public response splits into two kinds of fear. One is immediate. People are hurt, homes are damaged, streets are cracked, and everyone is trying to locate loved ones. The other is deeper, a cold, creeping dread that the main event might not be the worst event. Because Mega-Quake is not just a big quake, it's a threshold. It's the kind of rupture that doesn't just rattle objects, it rewrites geography and infrastructure and daily life. As the aftershocks continue, emergency managers begin preparing for cascading failures. Chain reactions where one break triggers another, and another, and another. Traffic congestion is no longer just inconvenient, it's dangerous. If a fire breaks out in a neighborhood with jammed streets, response times stretch. If an aftershock drops debris onto a major route, sections can lock entirely. If communications networks are strained by millions of people calling at once, a simple request for help becomes a scream into silence. People with relatives in high-rises worry about elevators. People with relatives in hospitals worry about generators. People with relatives who commute worry about overpasses and underpasses and all the concrete above moving vehicles like a loaded trap. Then the stories begin to surface, the human stories that turn a seismic event into a catastrophe. A family in an apartment complex runs down the stairwell as alarms scream. Halfway down, an aftershock hits, and the handrail shakes so violently their grip slips. A child cries, not understanding why the building is angry. The parent doesn't answer with reassurance, because reassurance would be a lie. They answer with motion. Keep moving, keep moving, keep moving. A commuter trapped on a freeway sits with both hands locked on the wheel, staring at the cars ahead that aren't moving. They glance up at an overpass and watch it sway with a slow, heavy rhythm that makes their stomach twist. They want to reverse. They can't. They want to get out. They don't know if getting out makes it worse. A store worker stands in front of a shelf that has collapsed. Products scattered like confetti, glass crunching under shoes. The lights flicker. A cashier station beeps in error. The worker hears the building creak in a way that doesn't sound safe. In a neighborhood, an older resident stands in a doorway, clutching keys, staring at the house they've lived in for decades, now marked with a crack running from the corner like a new scar. They don't know if they can go back inside. They don't know if the next aftershock finishes the job. And on the streets, you see what the camera never captures in real time: people's faces, that wide-eyed, hollow look, the one that comes when your brain realizes it cannot predict the next 5 minutes. The look of a population forced into the oldest fear, an invisible force underfoot. As dusk approaches, or even in full daylight, there's a growing recognition that the quake is not a single headline. It's a situation, a living thing. Because aftershocks aren't just more shaking, they are a message. The ground is not settled, the ground is still shifting, and if the strain is moving, it can move into other places. That possibility changes everything. Emergency operations begin coordinating across jurisdictions. Different agencies try to speak with one voice: avoid travel unless necessary, report hazards, conserve phone battery, prepare for outages. Shelters begin to open for residents who cannot return home. Hospitals prepare for surges, not just from initial injuries, but from secondary accidents, falls, crashes, debris impacts, panic-driven mistakes. And panic is now a hazard of its own. People rush to stores for supplies, creating crowds, and crowds become dangerous in unstable buildings. Some people flood gas stations, and gas stations become dangerous when lines are long, engines are hot, and the ground can still jolt again at any moment. A new aftershock hits, strong enough to send a fresh wave of screams through neighborhoods. It knocks items off shelves that already look empty. It shakes light fixtures loose. It causes a fresh round of car alarms to erupt like a chorus of terrified animals. The feeling spreads that the region is being hammered repeatedly, and nobody can call time out. Now the infrastructure starts showing its cracks in the most unforgiving ways. Power outages expand. One grid failure forces another station to pick up load. That strain can cause more failures. Darkness spreads block by block. In the dark, people trip over debris they didn't see. In the dark, intersections become chaos. In the dark, the city begins to feel less like a modern system and more like a fragile set of lights that can be snuffed out. Water pressure drops in some areas as systems take hits. A broken main turns a street into a river, wasting water when residents may soon need to conserve. In some places, water is contaminated by backflow, forcing warnings. People turn on taps and watch air sputter, then nothing. It doesn't have to happen everywhere to create panic everywhere. Cell towers become overloaded. Calls don't go through. Messages arrive late. People refresh screens like that will force the world back into order. And when they can't connect, they start driving toward family, toward friends, toward any place that feels less uncertain. Roads clog further. The system tightens like a knot. Transportation corridors become the arteries of fear. If inspections close a bridge, the detours funnel into smaller streets. If a tunnel is restricted, traffic backs up for miles. If a rail line halts for safety checks, commuters pile onto roads, and the gridlock becomes a wall. Emergency responders face an impossible equation: too many calls, too many unknowns, too much moving ground. They must prioritize life-threatening situations, but even determining what is life-threatening is hard when communications are failing. They must enter structures that may not withstand another aftershock. They must cut through debris while knowing another jolt could bring more debris down on their helmets, and the aftershocks keep coming. Not evenly spaced, not predictable. Just sudden reminders that stability is a fantasy. The looming threat grows larger with each jolt. The idea that a bigger rupture is still possible, still loading, still waiting. People in Southern California live with the knowledge of earthquakes, but living with knowledge is not the same as living through a sequence that feels like it's building. When the title says Mega-Quake jolts cities, it signals a scale that forces everyone to think about the worst. Not in a quiet theoretical way, in a raw physical way, with every aftershock. And the worst isn't only about shaking, it's about what shaking does to everything humans build. It breaks trust in structures. It breaks routines. It breaks the assumption that systems will respond when needed. When an earthquake sequence continues, it also breaks the illusion that the danger has passed. Families gather in open spaces, parks, parking lots, sidewalks, because open space feels safer than walls. But open space is exposed to cold nights, to confusion, to lack of resources. People huddle in blankets pulled from cars, scrolling for updates that won't load, listening for sirens that never stop. In some communities, rumors ignite faster than official messages can correct them. Someone says a dam is damaged. Someone else says a freeway is down. Someone else claims a bigger quake is imminent. And even when those claims are wrong, they still do damage because fear doesn't wait for confirmation. It spreads through groups like smoke. Officials push out calmer language, but the language itself is a thin shield against what people feel under their feet. Prepare. Stay alert. Expect more. These are not comforting words, they are commands in the face of uncertainty. Then the human impact deepens. A family tries to get home but finds their route blocked by inspection points. They take detours that lead to congestion. They watch the fuel gauge drop. They argue, not because they hate each other, but because stress demands an outlet. A nurse finishes a shift in a hospital running on backup power, exhausted, stepping outside into aftershock tremors that make the street feel alive. They look at the skyline and wonder which buildings are now compromised, which ones are safe, which ones are waiting for the wrong vibration. A construction worker stands near scaffolding that sways too much with each tremor. They back away, heart pounding, realizing how quickly steel and gravity can become lethal. In neighborhoods, people go door to door checking on neighbors because official help may be delayed. A man helps an elderly couple step over broken glass. A teenager carries water for someone whose line is out. A group pulls debris away from a jammed gate. Community becomes the first response long before any agency arrives. But community also feels the weight of how big this may become. There are only so many hands, only so much water, only so much power in a flashlight battery. Only so much calm before the next jolt rips it away. The bigger threat isn't a single collapsing building. It's the combined effect of thousands of small breaks. A few gas leaks become dozens. A few broken water lines become widespread pressure drops. A few road closures become gridlock. A few communication failures become a citywide inability to coordinate. And above all of it is one overriding terror, the uncertainty of the next major movement. Aftershocks can feel like punches, but they can also feel like warnings. And when they roar in repeatedly, the mind starts seeing patterns where it cannot confirm them. Every vibration becomes suspicious. Every passing truck feels like the start of another quake. Every creak of a house becomes a countdown. The public's sense of time distorts. Minutes feel like hours. The wait between aftershocks becomes unbearable because the human brain is built to adapt to steady danger, something you can understand, but not to random danger. Random danger creates helplessness. Helplessness creates panic. Panic creates mistakes. Now the emergency response begins to show strain. Dispatchers are overloaded. Fire crews are stretched. Medical supplies are redistributed. Mutual aid is requested. Officials begin planning for longer-term displacement if homes are not safe. Inspectors must move rapidly, but inspections take time, and time is the one thing the public can't tolerate when the ground keeps shifting. Schools face decisions. Businesses close. Hospitals triage. Shelters fill. Public transit lines pause and restart. Pause and restart, like the city itself is stuttering. And every time things begin to stabilize, another aftershock hits, forcing everyone back to step one. Reassess, recheck, re-evacuate, recalm the terrified. The title says, Authorities Alarmed, and in this kind of scenario, that alarm is not performative. It's a signal that professionals are seeing stress indicators they do not like. It's a signal that the event is not cleanly ending. Because a Mega-Quake sequence doesn't necessarily finish when the shaking stops. It can alter the region's vulnerability for hours, days, longer. It can weaken structures that then fail later. It can damage unseen supports. It can create hazards that appear only after traffic returns, after people re-enter buildings, after the adrenaline fades. And then there's the looming chain reaction. If one area releases strain, neighboring areas can feel it. That possibility hangs over Southern California like a storm cloud without rain, just tension. Residents begin to listen for helicopters. They hear them and feel both relief and dread. Relief because someone is looking. Dread because helicopters don't fly low when everything is fine. News coverage becomes wall-to-wall. Clips show swaying cameras, people shouting, dust rising from hillside areas, sections of road cracked. But the most chilling footage is always the calm moments. People standing in open lots, silently watching buildings, waiting for the next jolt. Authorities urge people to stay off roads to allow emergency response, but people keep moving because fear drives motion. Fear says, get to family, get to safety, get away from walls. Fear doesn't follow traffic guidance. Then another aftershock hits. This one is stronger than some of the others. Strong enough to knock objects down again. Strong enough to make people scream again. Strong enough to make every, "I think we're okay," evaporate instantly. You feel it in your chest, that sickening drop. You see it in the way people crouch automatically, hands over heads, even in the open because instinct takes over. In that moment, the dread becomes something sharper, the sense that this sequence is climbing. Now, emergency officials aren't just responding. They are trying to stay ahead of a moving target. They push new instructions. They warn against entering damaged buildings. They emphasize checking gas lines and turning off utilities if necessary. They ask people to keep emergency supplies close. They reinforce, aftershocks will continue. And the public hears that word, continue, and realizes they might be doing this all night, or longer. Nighttime amplifies everything. The dark makes every sound ominous. The dark makes every aftershock feel larger because you can't see what is moving, only what is falling. The dark makes streetlights precious. The dark makes the city feel like it's on the edge of a blackout. If power outages widen, the consequences multiply. Refrigeration fails, medical devices at home lose power, charging becomes impossible, traffic lights stay dead, and emergency communication becomes harder. If water pressure drops further, firefighting becomes harder. If gas leaks increase, fire risk rises. If a fire starts in a neighborhood with damaged hydrants and blocked roads, it becomes a nightmare. That's the escalation nobody wants to say out loud, but everyone feels it. The public begins to make hard choices. Sleep in cars, sleep outside, drive to relatives, stay put. Every option has danger. Cars in gridlock can't move if a major aftershock hits. Sleeping indoors risks debris. Sleeping outdoors risks exposure and uncertainty. Driving risks bridges and debris and congestion. In the middle of these decisions, the aftershocks roar again, as if the earth is impatient with human planning. And somewhere in the region, something essential fails. An important line, a key route, a major hub, and suddenly the situation is not just a quake event. It's a regional emergency with unstable systems. This is where the mega in Mega-Quake becomes more than a number. It becomes a scale of disruption. People are not only afraid of what has happened, they are afraid of what is still possible. They begin scanning their environment like prey animals. They listen to walls. They watch for swinging lamps. They keep shoes on, even inside, because glass can appear anywhere. They keep bags by the door because leaving may be sudden. They keep children close because chaos separates people. And in the background, officials and scientists remain caught between two terrible truths. They can describe risk, but they cannot promise safety. They can tell people what to do, but they cannot stop the ground. They can respond, but they cannot predict the exact next hit. The uncertainty is the enemy. As the sequence continues, the region's nerves fray. Every small shake triggers new panic. Social media fills with clips, but also with fear. In neighborhoods, people argue about whether to evacuate. In households, relationships strain under stress. In hospitals, staff keep moving because stopping is not an option. The worst-case scenario isn't a single moment, it's a prolonged unraveling. And the title's final warning, authorities alarmed, lands heavier now because it suggests professionals are not seeing a clear endpoint. The aftershocks are not fading into harmless ripples. They are still roaring, still sharp, still able to damage what's already weakened. A city can handle one shock. It struggles with many. A region can absorb a hit. It begins to fracture under repeated impacts. And as the hours stretch, an unsettling truth settles over Southern California. Even if the biggest jolt has already happened, the danger isn't finished. Because aftershocks can trigger secondary disasters, and because a stressed landscape can hide a larger movement still waiting in the dark. People look at their homes and wonder what they can trust. They look at the roads and wonder what's underneath. They look at the skyline and wonder which structures are silently compromised. They listen for another roar from beneath the streets. Because what's happening beneath Southern California isn't just shaking, it's shifting, grinding, redistributing pressure in ways no one can fully see. And as the city tries to breathe again, another aftershock hits, and the breath catches, and the dread returns full force. The ground is not done. The question isn't whether the aftershocks keep coming. The question is, what if this is still building towards something worse?